of being a little shallower than what you typically see, called out being 118 feet in depth. You need to bring it's a more compact site, and to incorporate all these things was something of a challenge. And the applicant did and does have a proposal that is reasonable and allows windows in a nice design to help fit in with the context and to help have a good living environment for those living in the building with the window openings. So also the other variance was one to allow 14 of the 152 parking spaces to be for French Meadow to have a shared parking agreement, that being across the street, and that's all due to the zoning of the neighboring lot. As far as traffic, I'll bring that up. I think I did hear some concerns of that. The applicant's proposal is for vehicles, both delivery trucks and cars for the residential and commercial portions of the project to enter off of Lindale Avenue South. Vehicles would enter or exit off of 26th Street. It'd be completely separate from the alley. And then delivery trucks, the applicant could probably talk more about this, but they're going to have a smaller delivery truck where they will not have to, they've shown maneuvering plans that they would not have to use the alley to have to access their loading docks within this portion of the building. But they are proposing to have those delivery trucks exit the alley here. They state in their traffic demand management plan that would be no more than two a day, and not always that many. With uses that are 4,000 square feet, there's elements, and this is on page 17 of the staff report. There's language that's not supportive often of having large delivery trucks within alleys when it borders a residential property. However, there's allowance for acceptance, or there's allowance for flexibility, and we are supportive of this proposal, given that the applicant has really, with having all vehicles, both commercial and residential, exit the site on their property, not the alley, that will eliminate the amount of use of the alley from this project. That's not necessarily what they had to do. They could have exited the cars for the residential portion of the project, come to the alley, going both ways. But this proposal just limits it to a couple delivery trucks a day that would be using the alley. And we have one of the conditions of approval is that they have signage within the loading dock area to make sure that vehicles, those delivery trucks, will exit off of 26th Street. So I'll stop there. I'm sure there's questions that the commission may have, and I'll be happy to answer those.
Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Kronzer.
Number 3 condition, the site plan review, talks about Rockface CMU. I didn't see any Rockface CMU called out on the elevations. So I'm wondering if that is a staff recommendation that's different from the elevations submitted, or if,
Thanks, Commissioner Kronzer. We got, in calling out a number of things, the applicant did make a lot of changes to their plans, but currently I think it says kind of what's the type of a painted masonry unit is what they're proposing, but we wanted to be sure that, and they've accepted this in with the plans that will be built, is that it will be Rockface CMU. I want to make sure I get to okay. And the 30% element is just to comply with the guide to exterior materials that limits it to that amount.
So is that on the east elevation only?
That would be on the east elevation and a portion of the south elevation. I have it all. Let's see, bookmarked. So here's those two elevations. That would be that first floor that where you would have the Rockface CMU. Commissioner Conzer, if you were talking about the 30% limit, I don't know if that was your question.
Well, I was just wondering if it was a difference between integral colored CMU versus integral colored Rockface CMU.
Right.
Is that the difference?
I guess and this is something that if you wanted to take up for the conditional approval or to tweak it, is we saw that plain face CMU, even if it was painted, as something that wasn't something that we were looking to support. So we were sticking to that guide to exterior materials that did call out that permitted
So
material.
the original proposal is painted.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Bender.
Took all that to get to that question. I apologize. That's my style. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple more questions about the loading. So if you didn't do this sort of interior delivery truck loading, what would be the other options? So there's a lot of businesses around here that don't have this sort of interior circulation. So what do they do?
With Public Works, there is the potential of on-street loading, but I'm not sure if that's what it would be feasible for the applicant or the potential retailer. In terms of other options, I do not know.
And if it was on-street loading, would that be on 26th Street then? Or do we allow loading on corridors like Lindale? I'm trying to think. There must be some businesses that do have truck loading on Lindale Avenue, but I'm
not sure if it would be 26th or Lindale Avenue if that's where it would go. I know other restraints of having the bus stop at that corner would provide some limitations or some other things that they'd have to consider.
And then could you talk more about how the turning movements would work? So would there be signage that would talk about the restrictions of turning movements for cars coming in and out of the two entrances?
As far as I'll have to let me refer to the traffic demand plan to as far as getting into the site and out of the site from Lindale Avenue, right? I'm going to also ask the applicant if they could address that, but that I don't know if the signage is a requirement as part of the discussions with Public Works.
There have been some questions as well about the greening of the site, and I don't know that there's a lot of space available on the lot that isn't either developed or green, but I wondered if you could also talk about if you see additional opportunities for greening on the site and how they're doing on their requirements.
Sure. So their requirements are minimal for the amount of green space that they do need to provide in the public realm because of the size of the building and because of the size of the lot. They do have these boulevard elements, the greening there along between the sidewalk and the street. They've also incorporated just these small landscape strips closer to the building to help soften that edge along Lindale and 26th Street. So the other element that they did provide is within that 4.5-foot setback on the south was the greening and the shrubs and trees along that line to help buffer between their building and the residential building to the south. So definitely an urban area, wanting a strong building presence. Feel that what they're doing in the public realm is a positive. I mean, if let's look at the pictures of along Lindale Avenue South, and when you have those gaps between the buildings, those spaces often are unused and unavailable for active uses. And so you have the buildings with the Treas and Nightingale, just a solid building wall going lot line to lot line. And you have the CC Club and the French Meadow, Treehouse or Common Roots over here that does have that vacant lot there. But that's something that you really don't see as adding to a strong commercial corridor where we want pedestrians. And so having the buildings there, but then really doing as much as you can within the public realm is what we see the applicant doing.
I just have a couple more questions, and I'm sure more will come up through the hearing. But I also wondered, I should have asked this when I was asking about the delivery trucks, but assuming this building may outlast any particular tenant, what do we know about allowing for deliveries if in the future of the building, or perhaps if something changes and the building ends up with multiple commercial tenants, would there still be able to be deliveries through the ground floor there at that just one location? And that may be something that the applicants could answer as well. But
yeah, I was seeing that, and if it is a corridor through here from the delivery area, or going from the loading dock to the other. So once again, I guess going from this loading area here to if this space was ever broken up, or on the street with the two-wheelers and getting products into those storefronts.
Thank you. Like I said, there's probably more questions that will come up.
Okay, are there any further questions of staff? If there are none, at this time I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, and then we'll get to some other speakers. And please state your name and address for the record.
President Brown, Commissioners, thank you. I'm Bert Coffin with ESG Architects, and I'm working with Don Gerberding of Master Development on this project. I'd just like to start with saying that working with the architectural team, we are very interested in, the key design features, the city building benefits that this project brings to the community. The streetscape is really very important and dear to us. And as Aaron kind of alluded to, especially along the commercial corridors such as Lyndale Avenue, you're starting to see projects that are really starting to fill in the street, and it's becoming a little more urban. We wanted to really focus on creating a very pleasant and high quality sidewalk realm, new boulevards, new street trees, and additional landscaping, which we've done kind of between the building and the sidewalk, so that Public Works wants kind of their minimum 6 feet to walk through, and we're trying to make it as green as possible otherwise. And then we have the green as well on the north side of the building also, and a little on the south. We're also really committed to high quality architecture that is transparent, that especially at the street level with a larger tenant like this grocer that's proposed, we want to provide for the possibility for the future that those could be subdivided spaces later. And so the design of the windows there is set up so that that space could be divided later into smaller retail pads. The first floor height that Aaron mentioned is 23 feet, really because of the topography on the site. The alley behind rises up quite high and it's about 7 feet higher, 6 feet higher than at the street level. And so in order to allow for all the service and loading to happen within the site, which we are committed to based on Public Works feedback, we needed to raise that first floor up higher so that structurally it would work. And that's really kind of our limiting factor for why the first floor is taller than it is. You heard about the parking strategy. It's really to put all of the parking down on the lower levels. And we really want to encourage, multimodal uses of transportation here. There is a bus stop that's very heavily used on this corner, and we think that's going to continue. The Nice Ride station, we're asking that Nice Ride keep it there. We really want that to stay, and we expect that the project's going to generate quite a bit of pedestrian traffic. There already is a lot of pedestrian traffic there. So there's been a lot of key sources of guidance for us, including our staff planner, who's been very helpful in guiding us. When the pedestrian overlay district expanded and that passed, he asked that we, look at trying to bring our building more in compliance. And so we've done that. We lowered the sills on the retail. We added the bike parking. He went through all that. And otherwise, the sources of guidance for us have been zoning, the comp plan, Uptown Small Area Plan, and Lynn Lake Small Area Plan, and the Greenway Coalition Plan. So speaking directly to some of your questions, Councilmember Bender, we've looked at a few different kind of service loading options, and we were really guided by staff and by Public Works to do this strictly within the site itself so that it can be contained and it's not really impacting anyone else. And so that's how it's kind of come to be what it is. So we can provide you with diagrams that show how the trucks would work and that they will do all their maneuvering on site. They will drive in and then kind of back up to that dock. We're very open. I've heard other feedback about signage, about vehicles leaving the site, and we're open to adding more signage to make it more clear. I think especially leaving the building for customers or residents and they're exiting onto 26th Avenue. We want to make sure they know to turn left and not to try to turn right. We know that's been a problem near there in another location. So we're very open to that. We're looking to green a little bit more up on the courtyard there of the building. So we will probably have pots up there to add more greenery, and we'd like more pervious up there. And then if in the future there are multiple tenants and the building goes to a multiple tenant building, the service loading dock can absolutely be used for those tenants. We just think that's just a smart long-term use for that loading dock. And then Commissioner Kronzer, you had a question about the rear elevation. We had originally, if I can clarify, we had originally specified an integrally colored CMU, but a flat one, not painted, just an integrally colored, which when you go on the websites of all these CMU manufacturers, they don't advertise it, but they do make it, and we just think it's a little nicer, cleaner look. But we're open to Rockface because we understand that that's allowed by the guidelines, and we're very flexible either way. We could do either one, whatever the preference is. The material palette of the building, we wanted to keep it very simple. We added the courtyard to provide some undulation along Lyndale so it doesn't feel like such a big building. It's really, a brick building with metal panel. As Aaron mentioned, it's the same metal shingles that you see on the Walker Library, those darker brown ones. And then it's a more lighter panel at the front of the building that's kind of highlighting the retail entrance and the residential entrance. So that's meant to be a slightly lighter color to highlight that area. I think that's all I have. So any questions were available.
Okay, Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I correct that this particular version of the design was never really seen at the two neighborhood meetings? I know there were a number of meetings before that this responded to, but did you get a chance to go to Whittier or Lena meetings?
We did not. We had a couple of meetings with the neighboring condo, and so we met with Garfield Gables, and so they did see the design. That's right.
I'll just note that isn't required, but so I've been doing my best to try to ascertain from folks what they think of this new proposal, and of course the neighborhood meeting is one way that we communicate about that. And so I think it's just too bad because I do think that this did respond, and so many of the people that I've reached out to, from those organizations, or at least the staff, felt that this was responding to a lot of the comments that had come in. But I think it would have been nice to bring this back just since it changed so significantly.
Mm-hmm. I think we would be happy to go to those groups.
Commissioner Kronzer, do you have another question?
So a couple other questions. We talked about the auto traffic. Is there any plan currently to have an auto coming sign as you exit onto 26th? As you know, a lot of downtown parking ramps have the
right, the flashing light and the
or something to alert folks.
Car is coming.
And while Aaron's doing that, at the entry point, we have the truck entry and also the auto entry.
Right.
What are your thoughts about having to get autos to the auto entry, not towards the loading dock? I know one's a door, one's an opening, one has the retail sign right above it. But I mean, there's a pretty big area of concrete there, and people aren't paying attention. They're going to drive the wrong way.
Well, we're open to a sign at the exit that would say auto coming just for pedestrians. I think that we would be definitely open to that. At the vehicle entry point, the idea is the service door is down most of the time, except for a couple times a day a service vehicle is coming. And that even in good weather, the other door going down to the lower level parking, that door could be open so that cars aren't, backing up onto Lyndale. Right. We don't expect that would happen, but you never know. So that way folks can just dive on down the ramp and go down to the lower level parking. That's kind of our current thinking.
Okay. And what about exterior lighting? There was some discussion a while back that they'd be installing pedestrian scale street lighting in the public realm. You mentioned building mounted lighting for the PO district. Can you just walk us through what the proposal is for exterior lighting?
So we're planning at kind of the canopy height, which is that about 12 feet up at the windows, where there's kind of a mullion break along the retail, that between every other window there would be a downlight, kind of a sconce that's attached to the building wall. And so that would provide kind of a regular lighting along the sidewalk there. That's kind of the current plan, and that would carry around on the 26th side as well.
Okay. What about the alley side?
The alley side? We need to meet minimum code there, and we haven't thought beyond that, but we're open to looking at that as well. It's definitely, we want it to feel safe in the alley.
Yeah, I mean, it's safety, but it's also not light pollution. I mean, it's really a careful balance that I think a lot of times we get wrong.
Right.
Okay.
Strictly downlighting for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers, and please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And I know we have several people who would like to speak, so I'll just ask everyone to be mindful of everyone else's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peter Robinson. I live at 2648 Garfield. That is right on the corner of 27th and Garfield Avenue. I share the alley that these people wish to destroy. And this building, one of the things that is curious to me about this building, it's presented not as the monolith that it is actually going to be, but as essentially three separate buildings. This has an absolutely monstrous it takes over 2/3 of the entire block. It is demolishing 4 or 5 single-family houses, that most of which have been turned into rental units, but which are only 2 stories high. It wishes to replace them with 4 stories of monolithic things, and it wishes also to eliminate virtually the entire front yard of every one of these buildings, virtually every south side yard, virtually every northern yard, and virtually the entire backyard. Now, this talk about green space in that center is euphemism for an incline that they are not disposed to do away with in what I believe they are calling the courtyard. That is the only green space left. This entire building, which stands then 2/3 of the block, is going to face right onto the alley. with no space at all, virtually no space between the alley space and that building. It is supposedly 4 stories high. But after all, since it's going to be built on the hill, they're proposing also to have traffic come in off of Lyndale into the beginning of that. And that's where all the pedestrian traffic is. All the sidewalk going right down in front of that building, they are proposing to have traffic go across it. Now, they're worried about traffic building up on Lyndale, but what about the pedestrians that use that block consistently and constantly? The Wedge is only 3 blocks away from there. People walk down that street all the time, plus to the restaurants that they very interestingly showed in the picture, but they're a block away. They're down on the other side of 26th Street. There is not a building within sight or almost walking distance of this area that is anywhere near the size of this thing. None. Even the apartment houses that were built on the Greenway and along the Greenway are not that big. This will just simply overlook and overshadow everything and everything. Look at that elevator tower. That condominium that they're talking about is that brick building to the right of it. There are only 3 buildings left after that one, all the way to 27th Street. They want to eliminate all the green space in 2/3 of that block. Now, one of the other things that's interesting about the alleys in this neighborhood, there are so many restaurants that there is not one day of the week, with the exception of the weekends, in which there are not garbage trucks going down every one of those alleys and all along 27th Street and all along 26th Street. Garbage is collected every single day in that alley, and those trucks are really big. Now, 27th Street is where all the school buses taking children to the Wilder School go. Every one of those buses, and they're there most of the times during the day, certainly early in the morning and certainly at the end of the day. The traffic in that particular block is quite big. Now, I notice here, one of my problems is trying to imagine, and I was glad to see these pictures. These pictures are misleading. That building is huge, and it stretches the entire length of that block. Now, they asked for a variance to allow off-site parking. Earlier, I received, as an owner of the house, a proposal to redo part of that area in Lyndale and do away with some of the off-street parking lots. Where is the off-street parking going to go? Already, Garfield is so crowded with cars that people have to park illegally, namely within 30 feet of the stop signs, in order to find any place to park. 77 units. 77 units in this thing. How many people per unit? Let's just say 2 people per unit, all of whom are going to be young people going to work and everything else, and almost every one of them is going to have a car, regardless of the goodwill of the buses and everything else. Where are they going to go? Not enough. And there was some talk of underground parking in the building, but not for 150 cars, is it? So where would they park? There isn't currently any place for them. There's very few parking spaces on Lyndale Avenue. My block on Garfield has probably 4 or 5 houses that are single-family houses, including mine, and the rest are apartment buildings. There's no place currently for any cars to park. This doesn't seem to be thought out in terms of how its footprint fits with the rest of the neighborhood. It's a gigantic footprint. It's much too big a building for the appearance of the rest of the neighborhood, and the traffic is going to be horrendous. Now, I noticed that you lowered the building one flight. Well, that was nice, but still, if you think of that not as 3 separate buildings, but as one building whose elevator tower is at one end of it, you begin to realize the size the absolute gigantic size of that building. It doesn't belong in the neighborhood which exists there today. I don't know how you're envisaging changing the neighborhood, but that doesn't strike me as what was it called? An urban space. The urban space already exists. What it's turned into is a high-rise space, and that's very different. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Danny Schwartzman. I own Common Roots Cafe, which is one of the kitty corner locations that we saw an illustration of. And then I also own the 2 duplexes at Aldrich and 26th. And then I have a parking lot parcel that's just north of my building. And I just wanted to come and voice a few concerns about these variance proposals. I also want to acknowledge that I think that this proposal is much better than it was before. And I don't want to take that for granted. So I appreciate that it looks much nicer and it feels better. And I appreciate the U-shaped layout. And I think that there are a number of things that are good about this proposal. I also have a bunch of major concerns. So one is the traffic, which I think a few people have pointed to. I think that we shouldn't underestimate the impact of a number of cars that a grocery store attracts to an intersection. But more than that, I'm concerned about the traffic flow. I don't have a solution to suggest. I had a good conversation with Bert, and I appreciated his feedback today about what options exist in the site. And I don't know that there are any to improve it. But by entering on Lyndale and all the traffic exiting on 26th, you're going to drop out all of the cars just before the intersection. And invariably, a fair percentage of these cars are going to want to turn right and go north on Lyndale. And anyone who's trying to do that is trying to cut across 3 lanes of traffic, potentially a bike lane soon, with very little distance to do that. And we already have an intersection that is challenging to navigate, where people turn the wrong way on a one-way street and generally have challenges and a lot of traffic congestion. So I'm very concerned about that. I don't have a solution to suggest for it. I'm also concerned about a single tenant taking up this amount of square footage. I personally am less concerned about the size of the building than I am how it interrupts the vibrant commercial district we have, which is a lot of independent businesses that are smaller footprints in this. And the footprint of this retail space is quite large and quite out of scale with pretty much all of the surrounding businesses. So I'm more concerned about that, the size of that retail and how that is not conducive to a pedestrian-oriented area where people walk around multiple small businesses like mine and others that are in the neighborhood. I think this is much more of a destination driving to issue and is not really in keeping with the sort of vibrant urban area we have. So that's a key concern. I'm also concerned about the lack of landscaping. I think that it's not terrible, but to argue that this is significant landscaping on this footprint of space is a hard argument to make. I would suggest that perhaps the building could take up something less than almost the entirety of all of these spaces that were houses that had yards, that there would be a way to creatively add more landscaping around the edges of the buildings and perhaps to make the footprint of the building somewhat smaller. I don't know that that works with the tenant that they have, but also I think that there's a real argument to be made, maybe not with the current developer and the current development, but these parcels are very developable. This is not the only development that would come in these parcels. This is a vibrant economic district. There are a lot of people who want to build things in this area. There are a lot of businesses that want to locate in this area. The economics might not work for a 4 or 5 story large development, but I think that there are a lot of businesses and a lot of buildings one could imagine building within the existing zoning. Finally, I have concerns about the submission of signatures on the zoning application, the zoning application for rezoning. I understand it's a bit complicated to determine how 2/3 is met, but looking at the number of parcels, and I understand it's not that they count plats and not parcels, but my math, they fell significantly short of the 2/3 required. And I would just question that is accurate and reflects reality. By my math, they got to 58%, which is not 2/3. For me, the neighboring condo building that's right behind this would be looking at a solid wall of 4 stories that are not the prettiest portion of the building, that don't have the benefit of the nice U that makes it more appealing to the eye than a solid wall that they will be seeing in the back. And I'd be surprised, I assume some of those tenants are here, but I'd be surprised if a large number of those tenants were in support of this project. So those are my concerns. I do appreciate the consideration you guys are giving to this and again to the architects who designed this. Finally, I'll note that I didn't get any communication about this project as an immediate neighbor until I got the letter from here. And I talked with Bert today, and he was very helpful in responding to feedback. But I would have appreciated a conversation, and I think that would be helpful in talking about how this community builds. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And who would like to speak next? Is there anyone else? Yes, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Mark Treas. I'm the CEO of 13th Floor LLC, which is the parent company for 3 buildings on the corner of 26th and Lindale. One houses Treas Records, which is also my business. Another one is the Nightingale Restaurant next door, and the third is a duplex at 610 West 26th Street, which are tenants of mine. I apologize in advance for my lack of preparation here and also my lack of social skills in speaking with large groups of people. However, I had surgery in Rochester on November 1st, and on Wednesday was my first day that I was allowed to work, and I understand that Wednesday is the day that the large list of plans was made available to the public. I haven't had a chance to review that, so I feel a little unprepared for all of this. Having said that, what little I've understood from my conversations today with Lisa Bender and Danny here is that there have been a number of, and I've seen none of these revisions that have been proposed here before the council. The last communication I had from Don Gemberly, forgive me if I'm butchering your name, was when he came into my record store unannounced with plans to give me $4,000 worth of work to enclose the garbage cans next to my building on 26th if I would sign off on his project, which I guess is probably legal, but in my book that isn't cool. I'm